He had lived his whole life without questioning it. He woke up, went to work, spoke to people, thought about the future, worried about the past, and believed all of it was normal. He believed he was his thoughts, his name, his memories. He believed he was the one behind his eyes, until one small moment changed everything. It happened on an ordinary day, with nothing special about it. He was sitting quietly, doing nothing important, when a thought passed through his mind. Then another thought followed it, and suddenly, something strange occurred. He noticed the thought, not the meaning of it, not whether it was good or bad, but the fact that it appeared as if it came from somewhere else. This confused him, because if a thought appeared, then someone must have noticed it, and that raised a quiet question he could not ignore. Who noticed it? He tried to brush it away, but the feeling stayed. Thoughts continued to come and go, just like before. Yet now, something felt different. He felt like he was standing slightly behind his own mind, watching thoughts rise, change, and disappear, like clouds moving across the sky. The more he paid attention, the clearer it became. Thoughts were happening on their own. He was not choosing them. They were simply appearing. Fear showed up. Memories spoke. Plans argued with doubts. But behind all of that noise, there was something quiet. A silent presence, watching. His presence did not speak. It did not judge. It did not react. It only noticed. That realization made his chest tighten. If his thoughts were being watched, then they could not be who he truly was. And if his emotions were being noticed, then they could not fully define him either. So who was he? He looked at his hands. They moved when he wanted them to, but even that movement was noticed by something deeper, something closer than his body. He felt as if he was looking out through his eyes, but also looking at himself at the same time. The world around him looked the same. The room had not changed. Time had not stopped. Yet everything felt unfamiliar. It was like realizing you are in a dream while still dreaming. Nothing breaks, but nothing feels solid anymore. A quiet fear rose inside him. If he was not his thoughts, if he was not his emotions, if he was not even the voice in his head, then what had been living his life all this time? The question echoed without words, and the observer remained silent. He noticed that even his confusion was being watched, even his fear was appearing and disappearing in front of that same calm presence that was the most unsettling part. No matter what he felt, something deeper did not move. It stayed, watching. For the first time, he wondered if this observer had always been there, through every moment of his life, quiet, unnoticed, waiting to be seen. And as that thought faded, another one appeared. If something is watching through my eyes right now, then who is it watching for? The question hung in the air, unanswered, and the silence behind his thoughts grew louder than anything he had ever heard. After that moment, he could not return to how things were before. Something inside him had shifted. He went back to his daily life. But now he was watching it happen. The voice in his head was the first thing he noticed. It talked constantly. It commented on everything he did. It judged, compared, worried, remembered, and imagined. Before, he believed that voice was him. Now, he was no longer sure. He sat quietly and listened. The voice spoke about the past, then jumped to the future, then complained about the present. Yet something strange became clear. The voice never stopped. But he did not feel tired. That made no sense to him. If he was the voice, why could he hear it so clearly? Why could he notice when it changed? Why could he feel distance between himself and it? Thoughts appeared without warning. Some were kind, some were dark, some made no sense at all. He realized he did not invite them. They simply arrived. This discovery unsettled him. If he was not choosing his thoughts, then who was? He watched a fear rise inside him. His chest tightened. His breath changed. The voice began to explain why he should be afraid. But behind all of it, the observer remained calm, unmoved, silent. The fear passed, just like a cloud moving across the sky. That moment frightened him, more than the fear itself, because something that does not change cannot be controlled. And something that cannot be controlled cannot be easily explained. He noticed emotions next. Happiness appeared, then faded. Sadness followed, then disappeared, too. Yet the observer stayed the same, always present, always watching. He began to understand something important. The voice in his head was loud, but it was not in charge. It spoke as if it ruled his life, but it came and went like everything else. He wondered how long this voice had been speaking, how many choices it had made for him, how many fears he had believed without question. the realization was heavy. If the voice was not him, then much of his life had been guided by something automatic. This raised a deeper question. If the observer was not the voice, then what was its role? It did not command, it did not interfere, it only watched, and somehow, that watching changed everything. He noticed that when he observed the voice, it softened, it lost some of its power. He no longer felt like the center of who he was. For the first time, there was space inside him, space between thoughts, space between reactions. In that space, there was peace, not excitement, not happiness, just quiet awareness. He began to suspect that this observer had always been there, hidden behind noise, covered by endless thinking, and, now that he had noticed it, it was impossible to forget. One final thought appeared, slow and clear. If the observer is always silent, then maybe truth does not speak at all. The voice faded again, and the watcher remained, waiting, as days passed. His curiosity grew stronger. He needed to understand what was happening to him, so he turned to science. Hoping it would either explain the observer or make it disappear, he began reading about the brain. Neuroscientists said that thoughts are created automatically. Electrical signals move, chemicals react, and ideas appear. No single thought needs permission to exist. This surprised him. Science was describing exactly what he was seeing inside himself. Studies showed that the brain makes decisions before a person becomes aware of them. The mind acts first, awareness notices later. That shook him deeply. If choices appear before awareness, then awareness must be something different from the brain's activity. He learned about attention, how simply watching a thought can change how strong it feels, how awareness can soften fear without fighting it. Again, science quietly agreed with his experience. Then he discovered something even stranger. Physics, at the smallest levels of reality. Particles behave differently when observed. Experiments showed that observation affects outcomes. Reality itself seems to respond to being watched. This idea stayed with him. If observation can influence matter, what does that say about the observer? He was not jumping to conclusions. He did not believe awareness controlled reality, but he could no longer believe it was meaningless. Science did not point to a person inside the brain. It pointed to a process, a field of awareness that notices change. He began to see that the observer might not be a thing, but a function, the ability to experience, even when thoughts stop. Even when emotions fade, experience remains. That presence felt familiar, as if it had always been there, waiting to be recognized. He noticed something important. Science never said who the observer was. It only showed that observation exists, and that absence of an answer felt intentional. The more he learned, the more his old ideas broke apart. He was not a solid object, not a fixed identity, not a single voice in his head. He was something more subtle, something closer to awareness itself. Yet science also showed limits. It could measure brain activity, track attention, map behavior, but it could not find the observer as an object that made sense to him. Because how do you measure the one who is measuring? He realized science was not denying the observer, it was circling around it, pointing without naming. This realization brought both comfort and unease. Comfort because he was not alone in this discovery. Unease because it meant the mystery was real. The observer was not a belief, it was an experience. And no equation could stand in its place. One thought returned, steady and calm. If science can explain the brain but not the watcher, then the watcher may be closer than science itself. The thought passed, the observer remained, quiet, unreachable, watching. With science no longer fighting his experience, he turned to philosophy. He wanted to know if others had walked this path before him. He discovered that thinkers across time asked the same question, who am I? Some said the self was an illusion, a story created by the mind, a useful idea, but not the truth. At first, this idea disturbed him. He had spent his life protecting his identity, his name, his past, his beliefs. Now philosophy suggested those things were temporary, changing from moment to moment. He looked closely at himself. His body had changed since childhood. His opinions had shifted. His fears were not the same. Yet something had remained constant. The observer. This realization felt heavy. If everything he called me could change, then what was left where nothing remained? Philosophers spoke of awareness as the background of experience, like a screen behind a movie. The images change, but the screen stays. This image stayed with him. Thoughts were the movie. emotions were the scenes, and the observer was the silent screen behind it all. He realized his suffering came from confusion, from believing he was the movie instead of the screen. When pain appeared, he said, "I am in pain." When fear arose, he said, "I am afraid." But philosophy suggested a quieter truth. Pain appears, fear appears, and something notices them. That something was not harmed, it was not improved, it simply was. This understanding felt freeing, but also frightening. If there was no fixed self, then who was responsible for his life? The answer did not come in words, only in awareness. Responsibility still existed, choices still mattered, but the heavy weight of identity began to loosen. He saw that the self was like a mask, useful for the world, but not the face underneath. For the first time, he allowed the mask to rest, even for a moment. In that moment, there was space, wide open, quiet, no story, no name, no past, just awareness. He noticed that this awareness did not belong to him. Rather, he belonged to it. This thought made his mind go silent. Philosophy had not given him answers, it had taken them away, and strangely, in that loss, he felt closer to truth than ever before. He did not escape the world. Life continued as it always had. Work still demanded attention. People still brought joy and conflict. But something subtle had changed. He moved through his days with a quiet awareness. Thoughts still appeared, but they no longer pulled him in the same way. When anger arose, he noticed it. Before it became action, when fear appeared, he felt it fully, without running from it. This noticing created space. And in that space, there was choice. He realized something important. The observer did not remove emotion. It softened its grip. Pain still came, loss still hurt, but suffering no longer lasted as long. He watched himself speak to others. Sometimes words came from habit, sometimes from fear, and sometimes from clarity. The observer did not judge these moments. It simply showed them. He noticed how often the mind rushed ahead, creating stories about what might happen, or replaying what had already passed. And each time he noticed, the mind slowed. Moments became clearer, colors seemed brighter, silence felt fuller. He realized he had been living in thought more than in life, and now, life itself felt closer. The most surprising change came during difficult moments. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he asked, "What is being experienced right now?" This small shift changed everything. He was no longer the center of every event. He was the space in which events occurred. This did not make him distant or cold. It made him more present. He listened better. He reacted less. He understood more. People noticed something different about him, though they could not name it. There was a calm behind his actions, a steadiness that did not depend on circumstances. He understood now. The observer was not meant to replace life. It was meant to reveal it. Each moment became an invitation to notice, to be present, to rest as awareness. And even when he forgot, even when the mind took over again, the observer never left. It waited, patiently, ready the moment he noticed once more. By now, he understood something simple but deep. The observer was not a discovery to be owned. It was a truth to be noticed. No final belief could hold it. No idea could explain it fully. It was present before every thought, and remained after every thought faded. He stopped trying to define it, and instead allowed it. Life continued to move. Moments came and went. Sounds appeared and disappeared. And through it all, awareness stayed. He realized the observer was not hidden. It had never been hidden. It was overlooked, like silence beneath sound, like space around objects, always there, never demanding attention. He understood now why no answer had satisfied him before. Every answer belonged to the mind, but the observer existed before questions. This realization did not end his journey. It softened. There was no final destination, only deeper noticing. He saw that searching for the observer was the same as being it. One quiet moment stood out. He noticed his breath, then noticed the awareness of breathing, and in that noticing, there was no distance, only presence. The story did not end with certainty. It ended with an invitation. If thoughts can be observed, if emotions can be watched, if even identity can be seen as an experience, then who is watching right now? Not the voice reading these words, not the images in the mind, but the awareness noticing them. The video does not give an answer, because no answer is needed. The question is enough, and in the silence that follows it, the observer is already here.